All right, so before we actually get into functional programming or object-oriented programming for that matter with Python, we need to discuss some basic types and then variables and then some other stuff. So in this video, we're going to be covering numbers. So what is a number? Well, I'm sure you guys know what a number is. I'm sure we've all been through grade primary and one, so we're all familiar with that. Now, there's two different types of numbers. One's called an integer and then a floating point. The floating point is basically any number that has a decimal included in it. So let's go ahead and write out some numbers on the screen. Now I'm going to be using the Python console down here for this video, so watch down there. That's where stuff's going to happen. So for an instance of a number, we can just write a number. It's going to appear in the console or the IDE or whatever, has syntax highlighting that you're using. It's going to show as blue, or it should. Actually, that really depends on your color scheme that you've got going on. It's going to show a specific color. Now, we can just use numbers in Python just by writing the numbers. And if we hit enter, it's going to print out 5. Now, with numbers, we can perform mathematical operations on these numbers, as you saw in some of the previous videos that we've done so far. So I could write 5 plus 6, and we're going to get a response of the sum of 5 plus 6. Now, what would happen if I wrapped these numbers in quotations? So let's go ahead and write 5 plus 6. If you think that this will produce 11, you're wrong. It's going to produce 56. And you might be thinking, hold up, 5 plus 6 does not equal 56. You're absolutely right. Not in math, however. When you're concatenating strings, it does. So basically, when you wrap something in quotations in Python, Python is going to treat it as a string, not a number. So if you're trying to perform mathematical operations, just remember, don't wrap your numbers in quotations. Now, additionally, we can use floating points to perform math operations. And you can see it returns a floating point. Now, if we ran 5 plus 5.5, it's going to still return a floating point. However, the last, it's 11.0 because we've passed it, decimal floating point numbers, and so it's going to return with one because that's just how it works. Now, we're going to talk about how to convert different types of types, I guess. These are called types. A number is a type, a string is a type, and right here we've shown both numbers and strings, and we're going to cover strings in the next video, but for right now, let's say, well, I have some numbers, but they're wrapped in quotations, and I still want to perform mathematical operations on them. How can I do that? So basically, in Python, there's a built-in function called int, which will convert a string to a number if that string contains only numbers. So let's look at a correct usage of int and then an incorrect usage and see the output for both. So let's say I have the number 5 wrapped in quotations. What I'm going to do is wrap that in the int function. And this is also how you write a call to a function in Python. And then I'm going to perform a mathematical operation on it with another number wrapped in quotations. Now, this is not going to produce 57. In fact, it's going to convert both of those into integers and then perform the math operations on them. So that's how to add up different numbers that are contained within quotations. Let's have a look at trying to convert text to an integer. So let's write int, and let's write hello, let's hit enter. As you can guess, it's printing out an error because there's an invalid literal for int with base 10. Basically, what that means is we've passed it something that is not an integer. So think of this function basically as it takes whatever you put into the function, it removes the quotations, and then returns that. Same if I just type this, Python's going to freak out because it doesn't know what hello is, because this is going to be interpreted not as a string, but it's going to be interpreted as computer code. And we're going to get more into strings. All right, so what is a string? Well, a string is any text that you want to be treated as text within a program. So again, we need to talk about a few other things that we're going to be talking about actually a few videos from now. But for right now, just try and follow along. So this is a string because it's wrapped in quotations. And if we hit enter, Python's going to say, hello, string. Now, you can also use single quotations here to do the same thing. So basically you have two options, either using double quotations or single quotations. Now let's say you want to have a word in your string that let's say you need to have a word in that string of text which contains an apostrophe. So let's say we wrap it in single quotes and we say, don't do that. Python's going to freak out about that because what it thinks is happening is that we're starting a string here, we're typing 3 letters, and then we're ending the string, and then it doesn't know what to do about all this. It's saying, well, T do that, I don't know what that means. There's no variable, and there's no function that I can perform on this, so I'm just going to freak out and give you a syntax error. So what you would need to do in order to print out don't do that is you can just wrap it in double quotations and then just type don't do that. And as you can see, when I print it, it's going to keep that intact. Now, alternatively, let's say you want to quote somebody. So let's wrap it in double quotes and say, she said, I want this. And then close it and close it. Again, it's going to freak out because what it thinks that we're trying to do is start a string, say she said, then end the string, and then it's going to freak out over all this because it doesn't realize that this is part of that string because we've explicitly told it to end that string here. So what you would do in this instance is just wrap the entire string in single quotations. So she said, I want this. And as you can see, it's going to print it out correctly. Now, alternatively, what if she said something that had an apostrophe in it? So let's try and cope with that. So she said, don't put that there. Again, it's going to freak out because we're starting the string here. We're adding a single quotation, which it's not interpreting as the end of the string. In fact, right here where this apostrophe is, it thinks that's the end of the string. So it's treating this like a string, and then this as constants or variables or whatever, and it doesn't know what to do with them because we're not telling it to do anything. And then these just random quotations here. So what we need to do in this instance is we need to learn about escaping certain characters. So let's write it out first and then I'll explain it. So what we're going to do is wrap it in single quotes, and we're going to say, she said, don't do that. And what's happening here, let's hit enter. That's not what, let me print that out. It's just returning what we wrote there. There. So we print that out, and what this does is the backslash here tells the next character to be interpreted as text, regardless of what it would normally be interpreted as. So rather than this trying to end the string, Python knows at this point that we want this to be printed out with the string and not end the string, but just print it out as a single character. And so that's what it's going to do. So there's times when you're going to need to do each of these in your Python code, and so that's how to handle strings and what they are. Again, a string is just a series of characters which is interpreted as text, and you can print it and you can manipulate it. And we're actually going to get into string manipulation. Say you have the number 6, right? And you want to print out this costs $6. You can't just well, actually, first we're going to talk about concatenating, because you can't do that in Python. I'm going to show you how. But first, let's learn how to concatenate a string, which means how to glue multiple strings together. So we saw this actually in the numbers video as well when we tried to add numbers that had been identified as the string, or yeah, the string type. And what it did was concatenate the numbers, and it made 5 and 6. When you add them together, it made it equal 56. And so that's, you're gluing strings together. So I'm going to say hello, and then pop out of that string, put a plus sign. And then in this string, I'm going to type Nick. Now what's going to happen is it's going to print out hello Nick, because I'm concatenating these two strings. You can also do this with however many instances of strings you want. So if I really wanted to get a little bit convoluted, I could do this. And this would print out hello using 5 strings all concatenated together. Now what happens if I want to say this costs $6? Well, because part of this line is an integer, it's going to try and use those plus symbols to perform a mathematical operation rather than printing out a string. Actually, it's the opposite. It can't convert the integer to a string. So it knows that we want to concatenate some strings together, but it's like, well, hey, hold up, this is not a string. I don't know what to do with this. So what we have to do is use the string function, which is similar to the int function. So how we do that is this costs $6. And what this is going to do is it's going to convert the number 6 to a string so that it can be used. Now you can also perform mathematical operations within the string parameter, I believe. So let's test this out. This costs, let's go 6 plus $5. Let's hit enter. Yeah, so it can perform mathematical operations within that parameter. It's going to convert the sum, or the result of whatever mathematical operation you're performing on it. It's going to convert that to a string, and then use that string to be concatenated with the other strings that you're working with. So that's how to use the string function, and maybe this doesn't seem like it's going to be important, or maybe it does, but you're like, well, how often do you use this? You know, we're going to see, because when we get into defining some functions, we're going to be using both strings and integers to return certain information, and so this is going to be important at that point. So that's how to convert integers to strings. It will also work for any other type. So we need the true and false in programming. However, we can explicitly declare true and false, like we've just done by just typing true or false, or we can generate it in other ways. So let's have a look at some of the ways we can generate a true or false. So let's type 5 equals 5. That's true. Now, when you're comparing two objects and you're checking if they're equal to each other, you can't type that, because the single quote, the single equal sign there is used for a different purpose in programming. It's used to assign a value to a variable, and we'll go over that here soon as well. So when we're comparing to check if two numbers or two strings are equal to each other, we need to put two equal signs. So you'll see that returns true. So let's go ahead and 5 equals 4. That's going to return false because, of course, we've all been through grade 2 math, and we all know that 5 is a little larger than 4. Now you can also do this with strings and also without using equal signs at all. You can actually type 5 is 5, and that will return true. And you can type 5 is not 5, and that will equal false. So basically you're saying 5 is not 5, and Python is saying, well, that's false. So you could type 5 is not 6, and that will return true. Now, again, you can do this with strings as well. So you can type this is this, and this is going to compare both of these strings to see if they're equal to each other, and it's going to return true because, yes, it is. Now, we can also do this. True is true will return true because, of course, true is true. Now, that last one is a bit of a obvious result. So let's go ahead and compare this with this. If you think this will return true because we're comparing true and true, the results will not be as obvious as you expect because one of them is a string and the other one is a Boolean operator. So not only when you compare two items is it checking if the value is equal, it's also checking the type of data that it is. So if we wanted to make the above statement return true, we would have to convert true into a string. So just like you would convert a number into a string, you can just wrap the Boolean operator in the str function, and it will convert it to a string prior to the comparison, and then it will return the result of true is true, which equals true. Now, true and false, again, they're going to come up in the if-else statements because that's where we're really going to do some error checking and make sure things are set and that they're not just not equal to each other. And you're going to see more practical uses of Boolean operators later on. But this was just to show you guys what true and false is. And again, you should already know this without a programming background.